Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive into the world of intermediate demonology. Today, we're going to be looking at Baal, and let me tell you his story. It's a wild one. We've got all kinds of sources talking about him, like the grimoires and ancient texts. We even have some modern interpretations too. So we're going to try to piece together who this guy was, how he went from this revered god to something a little bit, well, darker.
Yeah, I mean, what I think is so interesting about Baal is that before he became this demonic figure, he had a totally different origin story.
Right.
Oh yeah, he started out as a Canaanite deity, a god of agriculture and fertility, super tied to the land and the cycles of nature.
Huh. So we're talking about a complete 180 here. Like he was worshipped, not feared, right?
Well, it's not so simple.
Yeah.
Good and evil weren't like black and white concepts back then in these ancient polytheistic religions, but Baal, oh, he was definitely one of the big guys. Even his name, like the name Baal itself, it means the Lord, which tells you just how high up he was in that whole Canaanite pantheon.
The Lord, huh? That's
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
pretty heavy title. So where does a figure like that fit into like the whole Canaanite mythology?
So he was considered the son of El, the high god, and he was like a key player in that whole life, death, and rebirth cycle they had going on.
Wow.
Yeah, there are all these myths about him, like battling Mot, who's the god of death. And then he ends up getting resurrected thanks to his sister Aneth, the goddess of war and love.
Okay, wait, hold on. A god fighting death itself. That's intense. But how does someone like that end up like, as a demon? That just seems like such a crazy shift.
Well, and that transformation is really what makes Baal so interesting. And I mean, it really makes you think about how cultures over time reinterpret figures, sometimes even demonize figures from different belief systems as their own beliefs evolve. It's like with the rise of monotheism, that idea of a single all-powerful god, well, that really clashed with worshiping multiple deities like Baal.
I see. So as these monotheistic religions like Christianity, they start gaining traction, these older gods, they're kind of pushed aside, almost cast as the bad guys.
That's exactly it. And I think some practices that were associated with Baal, things like child sacrifice, probably didn't help his image either in the eyes of these new religions.
Yeah, no kidding. Child sacrifice. That's pretty hard to reconcile with this idea of a being who's all about wisdom and knowledge, which we'll get into a bit later.
Hmm.
But it sounds like Ball definitely got a pretty major PR makeover at some point.
Oh, absolutely. By the time we get to the real meat of demonology, Baal's gone through a complete transformation. He's not a benevolent god anymore. He's a full-on king of hell, the guy in charge of legions of demons.
Wow, talk about a fall from grace, huh? So from a deity to a demon. But what's really interesting to me is that the Zohar, that's like a key text in Jewish mysticism, it puts Baal on the same level as the archangel Raphael, which is, I mean, that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, it's a very complex detail, that one from the Zohar, isn't it? Because it really brings in this kind of duality to Baal, It's like his old divine status is still there, like echoing, even after he becomes this demonic persona.
Okay, so we've got this major player in the demon world. But what about his powers? I mean, what could Baal actually do?
Well, if you look at the grimoires, those books about magic and demonology, they're pretty consistent on Baal's abilities.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. From the Goetia to the Pseudomonarchia Daemonum to even the Dictionary Infernal, they all describe him as this powerful leader, always in charge of all these legions of demons.
So there's that consistency again
Exactly.
across all these different sources, which really, kind of underlines that he's a force to be reckoned with in that demonic realm.
Yeah, and they don't just talk about, his rank. They actually get specific about his powers. Like, he's supposed to be able to bestow wisdom
Oh, interesting.
and grant invisibility. And some sources even mention shape-shifting, which gets even more interesting when you think about how he's depicted, visually. We'll get into that later.
Shape-shifting, huh? Okay, now that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's almost like, those powers, they're kind of like this distorted reflection of, what he was before, that connection to nature and knowledge as a god, like the wisdom and invisibility that he offers. It's like maybe those are just like twisted versions of his old divine powers.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to think about it. And speaking of transformations, let's talk about Bell's appearance,
Yeah.
right? Because we've got these descriptions of him as this triple-headed being, and let's just say not exactly your typical angel.
Yeah, when it comes to Baal's looks, they get pretty wild. Forget those peaceful angels with their flowing robes. We're talking about a cat head, a toad head, and a human head all in one.
Okay, now that's a visual. I mean, I don't know if it's comical or terrifying,
Yeah.
but any ideas why those specific animals, it seems like there's got to be some symbolism going on there.
Oh, there's definitely a reason for each of those heads. Like the cat, known for stealth and its instincts, maybe that's supposed to represent like Baal's cunning, or maybe his ability to move between worlds, the seen and the unseen.
Okay, I can see that.
And then you got the toad, often associated with transformation, with its connection to the earth. That could be a nod to his old agricultural roots.
Right, right.
Or even like a hint at those shape-shifting powers we were just talking about.
Yeah, so each head is kind of like a piece of the puzzle,
Exactly.
giving us a little glimpse into, his personality and his powers.
What about
The human head, though, that's got to represent, like his intelligence, his leadership qualities.
Right, exactly. The human head probably symbolizes his intellect, his ability to like think strategically and lead, which makes sense considering he's supposed to be a king among demons.
Right. Yeah, makes sense.
And I think it also kind of reinforces this idea that even though he's, got this monstrous form, there's still a part of him that's, still got that human-like awareness and understanding.
So we've got this triple-headed creature with all this symbolism. Are there any actual like illustrations that depict this? I mean, I'd love to see how artists have interpreted this wild image.
Oh, there are. You should check out Colin de Plancy's Dictionnaire Infernal from the 19th century. It's got a really striking illustration of Baal. It's got those classic three heads, but here's where it gets even creepier. It looks like he's got spider legs too.
Spider legs. Whoa. Okay. Now that's taking it to a whole other level. Did the spider legs like mean anything, or is it just to like amp up the creepiness factor?
It's definitely a detail that sticks with you. I mean, spiders, they're often associated with like weaving webs,
Yeah.
right? So maybe it symbolizes entrapment or manipulation,
Mm-hmm.
maybe even hinting at Baal's ability to kind of influence and control those people who seek him out.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's a pretty chilling thought. It's like he's using his knowledge and powers to trap people. Like he's weaving these dark plans and strategies.
Right.
Definitely a far cry from that benevolent god of agriculture we were talking about before.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It just shows how much perceptions can change over time. Like, a figure who was once revered as a god can become this symbol of something much darker, much more menacing.
Okay, so we've gone from a powerful god to a king of hell with a a seriously creepy appearance. So what's the takeaway here? It seems like there's more to Bel's story than just another demon in a grimoire.
Yeah, what I find so fascinating is that, Baal kind of embodies the evolution of these belief systems, right?
Mm-hmm.
He starts out as this god who's so connected to nature, to fertility. He was worshipped, but also feared.
Mm-hmm.
And then he ends up demonized, like he represents this darker side of knowledge and power.
So it's like those lines between god and demon, they're not always so clear.
Right.
Perceptions change. You've got these, clashing cultures. And figures like Bel, they kind of get caught in the middle.
Exactly. It really makes you think about how we, as people, interpret and reinterpret figures from history, right? Like we're always projecting our fears and our anxieties onto them.
Well, that's well put. So to recap, Bel, this once powerful Canaanite deity, goes through this radical transformation.
Yeah.
He becomes a major player in, the world of demonology. He's known for, giving wisdom and invisibility, commanding legions of demons, and of course that unforgettable triple-headed look. And let's not forget all the symbolism behind those heads too.
Oh, yeah, right.
Each one, like you were saying, it gives us little window into his nature, his powers.
I mean, yeah, even the most, monstrous looking figures, they can have like deeper meaning. They're not always so simple.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been quite the journey. I feel like everyone listening is probably walking away with a whole new perspective on Baal, right?
Yeah, I hope so. It's a fascinating story.
So before we wrap things up here, any final thoughts? I mean, what would you say is like the most important takeaway from all this?
Well, I think it's important to remember, don't just take things at face value. Like when you encounter figures like Baal, especially when you're, looking into demonology, don't just accept what you read on the surface. Dig a little deeper, explore their origins, look at the cultural context. It might surprise you what you find.
Yeah, I mean, that's good advice for anything, really, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Always question, always explore. Never stop learning. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of Baal. It's been a fascinating journey, and I think everyone listening is probably walking away with a new appreciation for this complex and multifaceted figure. Until next time, keep exploring those shadows, and remember, sometimes the most interesting stories, well, they're the ones that challenge, those preconceived notions.